There have been all kinds of demands from environmentalists and political leaders to ban single-use plastics in Canada. The reasoning is that this is necessary to save the planet. But will a plastic ban actually make things better or worse? We thought it might be good to hear from the other side of the issue. Joining me now is Richard Friesen, who's a business owner involved in producing plastics for over 20 years, and he lives right here in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, a lot of grocery stores are talking, bottom line, we're getting rid of the plastic bags, bringing in paper bags. Is that a good idea?
No, quite frankly, it's a rather bad idea. It's totally the wrong approach. Plastic was invented, thank goodness, to take away a lot of the problems that there were with paper bags. First of all, the cost. Plastic is substantially cheaper. A plastic bag is substantially cheaper to produce. And believe it or not, the environmental impact is a lot less with plastic than it is with paper. Most people think of paper, it's a paper bag, but look at where it came from. It came from a forest somewhere, and there was a big piece of diesel machinery that had to take the tree down, and then it's transported. Again, there's a fair bit of transportation, and then off to a pulp mill. And pulp mills are always located close to a water source. So there's a lot of water used in the production of paper. Every time when you look at a paper mill, you'll see the big smokestacks, and there's a lot of smoke going up in those stacks. And
aren't you saving trees at the same time too if you go plastic instead of paper?
We're saving trees. Trees suck up CO2 and produce oxygen, and so the cost is significantly more when you take the entire footprint into consideration. To make plastic, you open a tap and you siphon off a byproduct of natural gas. Most of the bags, or virtually all the bags in the food industry, are made from either polyethylene or polypropylene, and both are byproducts of natural gas.
How about transporting as well? Is paper more expensive than plastic?
Transportation, right, it's a good point. One truckload of plastic bags, or I should say a truckload of plastic bags can carry the same amount as 7 truckloads of paper bags. So that's, there again, the transportation costs are 7 times more when it comes to paper versus plastic.
But how about breaking down in a landfill? That's where a lot of people have concerns. It's like, it's not biodegradable where the paper is. I think that's where a lot of environmentalists have their concerns.
A lot of landfills are not healthy landfills. They don't necessarily, in some landfills nothing breaks down. You can dig into a landfill that's not working properly, and you'll read newsprint from the 60s. And actually, in a landfill, plastic is probably one of the safest items in the landfill. When the plastic, if it doesn't degrade, well, no harm done, because there are no toxins in plastic bags used in the food industry. And that is why we can put food into these bags. We can put bread into a bread bag, and there's nothing will leach into the bread.
But how about actually burning the plastics? Do we release toxins into the atmosphere that way?
If plastic is burned properly, incinerated properly at a high enough temperature, and the smokestacks are properly built, designed, there's very, very little gases going into the atmosphere. Whereas in a landfill, we got to remember, also produces greenhouse gases. And so if that's true, incineration does produce some greenhouse gases, but the fuel that is in plastics makes an excellent source of energy for a generating plant.
You know what's interesting too is how some of the fast food restaurants you go to now, they have paper straws instead of plastic straws. You know, we got to get rid of all those plastic straws. And I've, used the paper straws, and it's already disintegrating. I know it's from the acid, whatever, within the pop itself or the soda, in my mouth, and I can taste the paper. Where you don't have that, that's not necessarily the case with plastic. So is it worth it? Maybe we should continue with paper straws for the environment, but no, well, like it's already breaking down in my mouth as I'm drinking my drink.
Right, that's a problem. I've noticed that too. Of course, it's a target because somebody shows a picture of a plastic drinking straw sticking in coming out of the nostril of a sea turtle. And that is unfortunate. But in Canada, we don't dump our plastic into the ocean. There are countries, particularly in Asia, where plastic does get dumped in the waters and it ends up in the oceans. But in Canada, it does not have that problem. And so this is a total overreaction.
Richard, let's go back to plastic bags for just a moment here. And what's interesting, a lot of people believe that plastic bags are made from oil, the oil energy sector. But that's not really the case, is it?
Not in Alberta. In Alberta, I believe virtually all of the plastic, especially polyethylene and polypropylene, are manufactured from ethylene, a byproduct of natural gas. We're not going to be replacing natural gas for our heating, our houses, and so natural gas will probably be used for a long time. And if we don't use the byproduct to make plastic, we'll probably just burn it off. And that happens to unwanted gases are usually just burned off. And we haven't really accomplished anything.
Some environmentalists and politicians want to see us, ban plastics altogether, like get rid of plastics. But I'm thinking to myself, we have plastics in our electronics, toys, car parts, the wheels on this desk here, where we're doing the interview.
Exactly.
It's just about in everything. So what's the alternative?
That's, I guess, turning the clock back to 1950. That would be one alternative. We had very little plastic back then. Because I don't really think there aren't economical alternatives to much of what we're using. Car parts, for example, a lot of them were made out of steel in the early days of the automobile, and that, of course, with them going to plastic, it has lightened the cars substantially. The cars would be twice the weight they are now if it wasn't for the plastic.
Now, I've heard there are also biodegradable plastic bags. Would they be something maybe environmentalists could get behind?
If it has the word plastic in it, it's tough to get an environmentalist behind it. But there are, in certain applications, biodegradable products can be used. One problem with biodegradable bags would be a time limit. If they start degrading too soon, they're generally not used in the food for food storage, but for other uses, garbage bags, our company produces biodegradable plastic.
Well, that's great. Tell me about that whole process, from the concept all the way to completion when it hits the store shelves.
Our plant produces plastic from plastic resin, and again, the resin is, for a plastic bag, it would be the same kind of resin that you would use to make Tupperware. Everybody's quite comfortable with using Tupperware to store food, and that is what plastic bags are made of, polyethylene. Okay. At least our bags. And if they're for a bakery or a produce shipper, they will get printed. And so we print the plastic, and then the plastic rolls of printed plastic rolls get put through a bagging machine, and bags are made according to whatever the customer specifications. And then after they're packaged, they usually go to a central distribution place, probably in Calgary, and then shipped throughout Western Canada.
Who are some of your biggest clients? Do you ship like across Canada and the United States, maybe to Asia?
Most of our no, we wouldn't be shipping anything out of or nothing to Asia, but our biggest customer base is Western Canada.
Have the restaurant owners told you, said, listen, we're going away from plastics? We're going to be going with someone else?
No, we haven't had information like that. We haven't had requests like that, no.
So if a plastic ban was implemented, especially with single-use plastics, the water bottles, the knives and forks, what's the financial cost to the consumer?
There definitely, it'll increase the cost will be passed on to the consumer, and I don't know what it would be in terms of dollars, but at a time when we want to look for more efficient ways of doing everything else, why would we pick on something as useful as plastic storage and say, hey, we're going to ban it and go to something more expensive? It just doesn't make sense. We should continually look for efficiencies, and by turning the clock back, going to paper, that is not in the best interest of the consumer at all.
And aren't the plastic bags stronger too than a lot of the paper bags for holding groceries? Or?
For weight, yes, for sure. Paper, the problem with reusing a paper bag, for example, is the chances are the second time you'll use it, it'll tear. And plastic definitely has per weight, it is substantially stronger.
How about recycling initiatives? I know some cities, they don't like to recycle the plastic bags. That's why they end up in the landfill. Where with paper bags, you know, it's a lot easier to recycle because you're using paper. So how do you respond to that?
Paper, for example, not all paper can be recycled. Take paper cups, they can't be recycled. Either it's because of the glue, if they're glued together, and most paper cups would be, you can't recycle them. Or they might have a plastic or a wax liner, and then of course you can't recycle them either. So most paper cups do not get recycled. Paper bags, if they're nice and clean, they'll be recycled. But a pizza box, no, you can't recycle it. Mm-hmm. So not everything that comes in paper can be recycled.
What's interesting too is the juice boxes. You know, they say let's get juice boxes because they're made out of paper. Well, they're covered in plastic too.
They are, and I'm not sure what they're being turned into because they have, like you say, a lot of plastic and glue. But the reason of course, why we keep them is because there's a deposit built into the price. So we're encouraged, of course, to turn them in.
So what's the biggest threat to your industry right now, Richard? What do you think? Is it government regulation? Are environmentalists putting some pressure on you, a little heat on you? Like, what are you feeling right now?
The biggest pressure in regards to recycling, I don't know if it would be really consumer demand. I would guess it would be interest groups, special interest groups, demanding that that special interest groups would like us to stop making plastic altogether, obviously. But that's a very narrow-minded viewpoint, and I don't think it's widely held. I think most consumers are actually quite happy with the way things are.
Has your business seen maybe a bit of a decline or a little dip over the last few years, as more people are thinking more about the environment, perhaps?
We haven't noticed a dip in our sales, but then again, our major product isn't one-time use plastic either. Most of our plastic that we produce would be for we do a lot of industrial plastic and other plastic.
So bigger businesses and corporations come to you and said, we're thinking of changing our philosophy, our ideology, maybe away from plastics or a different alternative because they want to be more environmentally conscious?
In our industry, we haven't been approached by any larger company to try and convince us to do it. We have a market, and we're there to help fill the market, and I just don't see this market as going away.
Now, there's some new studies that say plastic bags are used as fuel, especially in some of the Scandinavian countries like Sweden. Can you talk a bit about that?
That's right. Sweden has 34 electricity generating plants that are fueled by garbage, and a lot of that garbage would be plastic. And the incinerators heat up boilers, and the boilers turn the turbines, and they're producing a fair percentage of electricity just from burning garbage. And of course, the smoke is scrubbed. The smokestacks are scrubbed. There's still some greenhouse gases going up the smokestacks, but probably a lot less than are coming out of the landfills where this garbage was destined to go. And another country that is using incineration and getting energy out of it is Japan.
Richard Friesen, owner of Friesen Plastics. Thanks a lot for joining me today on Bridge City News.
Thank you.